Shannon Matthews, the musical, the movie, was released today, in fact. It was released in 2024. It's directed by Samantha Hindman, and it's written by, well, I can't say this on YouTube, but it's Kunt. And this is not for people who are easily offended. It's not for young people. The language is very, very strong. And I'm personally not easily offended. I also think that laughing at dark things can be very beneficial, and also helps to ensure that history won't repeat itself if we're pointing out that certain actions are not exactly acceptable. That being said, there are 3 criteria that I had in mind when I sat down to watch this film, and I will talk about those briefly. I will then give a tiny history of the film. I think it's got quite an interesting history leading up to the release of the film, and then I will share some thoughts on the film. I'm going to say I won't give any spoilers. I mention a few specific funny things towards the end, but obviously it's not necessarily something that can be spoiled because it is based on truth. And if you're unaware, this is based on the horrific events in 2008 where Shannon Matthews allegedly went missing. And well, I will explain what happened. So I guess this is a bit of a spoiler if you're not familiar with the story, but I will say if you're looking to learn more about the case, I'd say this is probably not the first place to go to. This is definitely, in my opinion, aimed at people who are already aware of the story, and I think there are some benefits to this, and I'll talk about those in a moment, but obviously there are some problems. Again, I'll address those. But ultimately what happened is Shannon Matthews' mother pretended that Shannon had gone missing. She was very much allegedly inspired by the case of Maddie McCann, which was a few months before this, and realised that she could maybe get a lot of money out of faking the disappearance of her daughter. And obviously that's absolutely horrendous. Shannon Matthews was 9 years old at the time. And obviously one might think that that's quite a sensitive topic. Could they really make a comedy musical out of this? Well, I'm going to talk about that in more detail. As I said, I had 3 criteria going into this, 2 of which I can confirm were met, 1 of which impossible to know, but I will mention those. So the first one is that it absolutely had to focus on the adults, the disgusting adults, their horrific behaviour. It had to focus on them rather than Shannon Matthews. The second thing is that Shannon Matthews had to not feature in this as a character. I feel like, for me at least, and maybe people would disagree, but for me, having her as a character would feel really inappropriate. And I'm pleased to say that, apart from her making a small crying noise, we don't actually get to see her. She's not in it as a character. And I think that was the good decision. That was the right decision. And the third thing is that I hope that Shannon Matthews, with her being quite young at the time, I hope that maybe her memories of the event, that's the wrong word to use, but her memory of the time is hopefully not that strong. I hope that she was offered a lot of therapy immediately after and has been able to heal as much as possible. So the only other way that this would be acceptable is if Shannon Matthews, who was immediately placed in, I believe, foster care, given a new identity, I hope that she doesn't see this and it triggers something, it negatively affects her, it causes her a lot of emotional problems. Obviously, I can't know if that's the case. So the first 2 of the criteria, absolutely met. The third one, it's impossible to know, but I'd say the only other way that this musical is acceptable is if it doesn't do any damage to Shannon Matthews now. And we can't know that. So that's definitely just something that's worth bearing in mind. However, I can confirm that as a film, it is creative, it is very effective, the performances are brilliant. Tiny backstory before I get in with more details. This was actually crowdfunded. It started off as just music. The music was released in 2010 by Kunt and the gang, and then the film was crowdfunded. And there's definitely a lot of support for this. It's definitely going to be controversial, absolutely. But it was crowdfunded, and there are 611 backers, and they raised over £26,000, which, needless to say, is pretty impressive. And the film, as I said, was released today, and I'm glad that if this film is going to exist, if the musical is going to exist, I think they took the right direction, because it is absolutely 100% making fun at Karen Matthews and the other adults involved in this. And that is, I don't have a problem with that. If somebody is going to be a disgusting, despicable human, then I think making fun of them is fair game. The film also helps to show that if you do this ridiculous thing, you're not going to get away with it. So don't even bother trying. And I think that that's absolutely the right message and completely the right road to go down. The songs themselves are very catchy, they're very well written, and the performances are brilliant. Samantha Hindman plays Karen Matthews, and I have to say, it's eerie. She's very, very good at emulating a lot of Karen Matthews's behaviours and mannerisms. It's it's unsettling, very creatively edited. It's also a little time capsule. If you had told me they'd filmed this in 2008, I'd completely believe you. There are so many pop culture references and small details like the mobile phone they're using and other little attentions to detail like that. I was very impressed. It definitely felt like we'd gone back in time, which in itself is quite an experience. The humour it varies in its style. I'll not go into too much detail, but I'll tell you one that amused me. It's not an offensive bit of humour. There's a lot of British humour in this. I don't think the humour in this would translate to outside of the UK, not just because our humour style is quite different, but also because there are a lot of references to things like Jeremy Kyle and other very British things. And one of the police officers is called PC World. It's such a small thing, and it just amused me so much. So there is a lot of creativity in this. Most of the humour is poking fun at Karen Matthews and her behaviour and her attitude. And I think if they were going to create this, which they did, that's the right way to go. I'm very pleased that they didn't really introduce Shannon Matthews as a character. And in general, I think it's absolutely fine. The only issue, as I said, is that we don't know what Shannon Matthews' mental health is like. It could be that she was able to heal as well as possible and she's doing really well and thriving, and I absolutely hope that that's the case. But it could be that she has PTSD or other lasting mental health effects, and seeing this, not just, I don't imagine she's going to sit down and watch the film, but just being aware of its existence could do a lot of damage, and I really, really hope that that's not the case. And that's kind of the only way that I would say that maybe this shouldn't exist. But aside from that, poking fun at people who did a terrible thing, I don't think that that's a problem. At no point does it glorify it. At no point does it say that those actions were acceptable. It is absolutely saying, what a bunch of idiots. And that's me putting it politely. So is it worth watching? If you're curious, yes. If you like British humour, yes. If you're sensitive and take offence to things easily, no, I'd say run away as quickly as possible, because it's very dark and the language is as strong as it possibly can be. Doesn't bother me. I'm not bothered about that at all. It's not going to be for everybody. I think it will be met with a lot of controversy. But as I said, if they were going to create this, then I think this is the best possible outcome. Aside from the moment when we hear Shannon Matthews, well, a character kind of making a crying and a little screaming noise. It only lasts a couple of seconds. That's the only thing that I think maybe shouldn't have been included in this. But aside from that, it's actually not too bad. It's very, very dark, very creative, really great performances. Funny in a lot of ways with little things like PC World. I'm going to be enjoying that one for quite a while. This isn't for everybody. And if somebody wants to argue that it's too soon or that it's not kind of in good taste, then I can see that. I can absolutely see that. I can appreciate that. But at the same time, I don't have a problem with making fun of people who do disgusting things. And as I said, highlighting the fact that if you do this, you're the one who's going to look like a fool. You're the one who's not going to get away with it. You're the one who's going to end up in prison for your despicable actions. That's not a bad message either. So all things considered, Shannon Matthews, the musical, the movie, is very creative. We have some very catchy songs, some really brilliant performances. It's very well written. And as long as Shannon Matthews is doing okay, I don't see a problem with it. But absolutely, it's not going to be for everybody. But if you're curious, I'd say it's worth checking out.